1945, Germany's armed forces were disbanded and the central government ceased to exist, and Germany nation-state was technically dissolved, leaving the nation divided into 4 Allied occupation zones, and governed by those same nations. Germany eventually was divided into 2 states, the British, American, and French occupation zone unified as the Federal Republic of Germany, or West Germany in 1949, that was permanent, and the Soviet government zone, which became the German Soviet occupation zone, which one party of the communist satellite state of both nations cautiously went towards the military's goals of a Germany that has armed forces and very controversial. Soon the horrors of World War II and the French, particularly strongly against a fresh German army, its borders having been invaded by the Germans in 1870, 1914, and 1940. But France was a junior in Allied powers. The occupation zone was divided by Britain, and the occupation zone changed from occupation to protection. The European nations who would have them group themselves called the bloc NATO, a North Atlantic Treaty Organization designed to counterweight the Russians. It has felt through the responsibilities and the sense of West Germany to rearm itself so it can help defend itself and Europe. The threat of Stalin is possibly the Europeans' peace and the serious military style of establishments of West Germany and the Bundesland of the border service in 1951, particularly by men in 1956. Although it was 300,000, they were equipped with lightly armored tanks and anti-tank weapons and infantry weapons. The uniform echoed the World War II era, even using the M1935 styled Stauffen or steel helmet. The mistaken wartime or the troops used in the border, so the BNG men won't be mistaken for US troops and exchange fire at once when border relations were extremely tense. But the authorization for a length of 20,000 men and the army with no stage, creating one proper armored forces. It was passed in the legislation German Council and blessed the Allied powers, giving the Bundesland existing 10 years of after displacement, wartime of Wehrmacht, of the part that was decided with one kind of armored forces. It could pretty much have everything associated with Hitler's Wehrmacht was rejected. In fact, of the traditional army equipments as the Reichstag and the Republic era of the importance of the German army of the wartime before it was cherry picked and from the past and from the future. The example of famous General Heinz Guderian and the Scharnhorst, now called Gaglanhorst, the army officers who attempted to assassinate Hitler, in particularly Heinz von Feuchten and von Valkyrie. The new army. The core of the idea of the Bundeswehr is an armed forces of a citizen's defender of a democratic state and supported German elections. The government.
Es ist mir eine Freude, am heutigen Tage zu Ihnen zu sprechen.
Dr. Adenauer is saying, you are the first soldiers of a new German army. You will have many difficulties, overcoming both the shadows of the past and the problems of the future. After years of trial, the German people now belong to a partnership of the free nations of the world. We have equal rights among these nations, but we also have equal obligations. The German people look to you as the defenders not only of their nation, but also as the defenders of our allies. Without this mutual cooperation between all free nations, the defense of one nation would be impossible. The sole goal of the new German army is to aid in this defense, to keep the peace. We mean this from the bottom of our hearts.
But the West Germans had faced a rather large opposition problem that was created by the Bombenführer, who led the new forces. However, it was needed the experience of military ranked officers and the West German government. The people of foreign leaders of organizations who were supposed to defend and defense partner equal to Britain and America. Of these countries of leaders that left Germany, of the possible source of a former general who served with Hitler and its Nazis, of the war of Europe's conquest. Exactly associations to West Germany avoided. A process was carefully vetted of former World War II generals, proudly hand-fought, and relative clean records with war crimes and accusations, or accommodations, with Hitler's government, and appointed new armies and new Inspector General Bundesführer overhead of the new military that experience of World War II general Hans von Lift. Hans was nicknamed Spiders. It was Airman Marshal Rommel's active spotter against Hitler and avoided the knife cross of the galleries. And the following of July in 1944, the bomb plot against Hitler had held the Gestapo and his boss Rommel face to commit suicide to avoid public disgrace and against his family. Spider managed to survive the war, escaping from the end of his captivity, and liberated by French troops. Spider became the first four-star general and Bundesanführer, ensured a smooth transition to the new face of NATO in 1977. The Spider became the Allied Ground NATO Forces Central Europe headquarters in Paris, and the First World War II of the German general commanded the face of the outside Germany, had died in 1984 at age 87. The post Inspector General and the 1957 by Adolf Einstein, former Chief of Army Staff under Hitler, instated and actually had been present in the Luftslayer in July 1944 in the briefing room where Cologne's staff briefcase bomb had exploded beneath the long briefing table. A Stabel was injured standing next to Hitler and received the rarely 20 July 1944 wound badge that disavowed Hitler, and the present of the bomb who donated or most of 24 Hausensteier received the silver grade and already have been wounded from the badge and now received, however. Oster was arrested by the Gestapo and questioned for circumcised and evidence of conspiring, but no evidence had directly implied to the plot, and he was released on October 1944. He did not involve himself in active kill Hitler plot, but he was obligation of his duty to be a soldier for the Reich. In 1950, Hauser became a military advisor and the Chancellor Conduct for the first leader of West Germany, and Hauser served as the Investor General in 1961 as appointed chairman of NATO and military's commitment to Washington, D.C., and he retired in 1964. Intensely, records have not shown that the Soviet Union had wanted him for charge as war crimes of the 1960s, but the German army and the Soviet concoctions of the never arrest and indicate of Hauser's death in 1982 at the age of 85. His place as an Inspector General of Luftslayer has been taken by the World War II General Friedrich, and appointed in 1961, another Knights of Cross holder of the field have ended the war, and the Chief of Staff of Army Konstantin, and the Eastern Front of the German surrender have taken prisoner of the Soviet placed in trial and hanged. His authority was specially indestructible of Soviet cities of Nogov and Leningrad, and this works of art. In 1950, he was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment and released in 1955 and allowed to go to West Germany. And the device of commander of the Bundesanführer succeeded Heyston as the leader, and he retired in 1963 and died in 1967. Barker's successor as the last World War II general of the intended World War II general was meant to die, and the Luftwaffe, Heinz Pfeiffer, that was commanding the 4th Paratroop Brigade at the end of the war. He was held the Ninth Cross and the Oath of Gravity. He served in the main Italian front division, the Crete Line, and implied in at least the massacres of the civilians in Vanto in late April 1945. He was held in Bolschenführer in 1964 to resign early, butting heads with civilian ministers, and he had said the last Wehrmacht general to die and passing away in 2006, one day of his 99th birthday. I hope you enjoyed this episode of me. Yay, Edison Books. Bye.